So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a little bit more editing here of my JavaScript. So now that we have the passport part, the other thing we need to be mindful of is that in some cases, because it takes some time to perform certain actions and we are running effectively what needs to be synchronous mechanisms, we will be using the await function quite a bit, at least in this tutorial. And in order to use the await function, we're going to have to create some asynchronous function. So before I create the asynchronous function, I'm actually just going to trigger it. So first, actually, let's start by creating the asynchronous function. So I'm just going to call it const, let's call it start, and let's say it's equal to async. Okay, and that's probably the world's most boring asynchronous function, but it does the purpose for now, and we're actually going to start filling it out after. But even though we have the asynchronous function, let me just move it back a little bit. What we also need is the ability to call this asynchronous function at the beginning, and that's where our good friend Rindo.onLoad will come in. So what we'll do is that we'll call that a function. And at this point, we're going to call start. And so this allows us to make synchronous calls and basically turn them, we're able to do synchronous calls and allow for a little bit of blocking, which at the startup, because we want to make sure the passport is created and initialized before we do anything with it. This allows us to do that. So it's just probably not the greatest JavaScript best practice in the world, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, it should make sense and should allow us to do what we need to do. Now, the first thing, and this is really important, that we need to do whenever we create a passport object is we need to initialize that object. Whatever you want, if you ever want to get the service as a passport, what you need to do, and it is an asynchronous request, and that's why we're going to call it like this, but we have the passport object here, and all it is a simple init. Not very exciting. It does what it needs to do, but this actually generates the passport object and sets it up and primes it so that it can then be accessed. Once you have this, the next part you're going to be able to do, well, for one thing, what we will do, and just as an instructional aspect, I'm just going to, in the console, I'm going to show you what passport looks like when we run it the next time. So now we've initialized it, and we're going to show it. So I'm going to save again, and then I'm going to save here. And then once it's completed saving, we're going to look at it over here, and we're going to hit refresh. And still, not very exciting, but if we take a look at this right here, what you will see is you'll see all the information about Passport. These are all the functions you can get access to. These are all the events that can happen, some of the parameters. There you see the chain ID that's set right there. There's even access directly to the ethers object that's associated with the passport object. So we even build a tunnel into ether. You'll also see a tunnel into the provider once the provider is set. So we've done that, but again, great, a passports object is there, big deal. Well, now the site is prepared to do a lot of things with Passport. And